Good morning everyone, and welcome to our Small Business Guide to Money Matters Masterclass, broadcasting live from the beautiful International Towers here at Barangaroo. I'm Cec Busby, editor of Kochie's Business Builders, and I'm thrilled to have you joining us. But before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're broadcasting from today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Now, on to today's masterclass. Now, we all know the challenges that small businesses are facing right now: rising costs, cash flow crunches, ever-present concerns about making ends meet. But don't worry, because we've got a financial guru in the house to help us navigate these turbulent waters. I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Justine McLean. Justine is a business money mentor and a financial educator, and she's dedicated to enhancing women's financial literacy in business and business owners' finances, and she's got years and years of experience in the industry. She's also the founder of Flossy Creative, where she works with small business owners to improve their financial management and increase profitability and achieve sustainable growth. So, whether it's helping clients understand their numbers or providing practical tips for managing cash flow, Justine's expertise is second to none. Welcome, Justine. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Hi, Cec. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. It's good to have you here. So let's jump right in, because I'm sure that our audience is really eager to get some insights from you on how to manage their money matters in these really pretty challenging times.
Very challenging.
So the first question for you that I have is, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing business owners at the moment, especially with, the rising cost of doing business, inflation still not stabilised? What's happening? What are you seeing?
I think you hit it on the head. I mean, it's the rising costs. That's the thing that I think people are struggling with the most, and the knock-on effect that then has for their consumers. So the people who are traditionally buying from them are tightening their purse strings. They're not spending as freely as they once were. So, the rising costs leads to, lack of customers coming through the door. That in turn, causes cash flow issues. And then of course, for a number of businesses, there's, the inability to get great staff to, work in their business. And so all of those things, I think, are compounding in this perfect storm of, difficult times for small business at the moment.
So how important then is it, given that there's all this turbulence going on, how important is it to be able to forecast what's happening for your business? Like, what is the best way for a business to create, say, a cash forecast?
Yeah, look, I'm all about forecasting. I think if we hear stories about, create a budget, do this, do that. If you're going to do one thing, I think a cash flow forecast is the thing that is going to help you the most in your business. And it's super easy to do. You can head on over to business.gov.au, download a template, and then literally, as the name implies, cash flow, it's all the money that's flowing into the business, all the money that's flowing out of the business. And it's about plotting those into, the months that they're due. You can create a forecast for a month, for 3 months, for 6 months, 12 months, totally up to you. And I think what that's going to show you is where, you have to pay the bills, where the peaks and troughs are going to be in your business, where, the money is coming in or maybe not coming in. And so you'll know then when you can spend, and more importantly, when you can save. And I think that's really essential at the moment. So super easy to do. Get that template and I think get started.
So you said 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever, it's kind of up to you. But when you're speaking to your clients, what kind of recommendation would you make? How far ahead would you suggest?
I always say 12 months because it just gives you a picture for a full year. And I think that means that you're going to capture all of those expenses that are coming out in a full year of business. So if, the insurance is due in 11 months' time and you've decided to do a forecast for 6 months, you're not going to capture that. So you want to be prepared as well as you can be. But for some business owners, the reality is this sort of stuff is just overwhelming. So I'm all about meeting people where they're at. If it's overwhelming for you to do a 12-month forecast, I would much prefer to see you do a 3-month forecast and kind of nail that down and at least know what's happening for you in this next quarter of business than to do nothing at all.
And you just mentioned expenses. I mean, obviously there's expenses that are ongoing that you can calculate, but sometimes unexpected things happen.
Exactly.
So how do you forecast for that? How do you make sure that there's, you know, the safety net to be able to manage those?
Yeah, I think
Unexpected.
I think the unexpected expenses, and we've all had those, and it's not just the unexpected expenses, but it's the unexpected events that happen as well. So, you know, who knew that COVID was going to happen? And then, you know, more recently we've got worldwide events, we've got increased inflation all around the world. So there's always going to be the unexpected in business, and I think it's about really being careful about setting up a savings account. So, you know, thinking, what can I do to create that buffer for my business that is going to guide me through those times? And for a lot of people right now, they'll be thinking, savings account, you know, are you kidding me, Justine? I can barely afford to pay the bills. But, you know, I've been there when I had my second business. We were sort of a few years in and we ended up with a $42,000, you know, worth of tax debt. We had no savings, 4 small kids. And I thought, right, now I have to pay this tax debt off. But I guess what it showed me in a really, you know, kind of big slap around the face moment was the importance of having a buffer, the importance of having savings in place. And so I literally started by scraping together coins and putting them into a money box. And when I had $100, I went down the bank and I opened a savings account that was just for my business. So I think to manage those unexpected expenses, it's all about creating that buffer. So ideally 3 months worth of business expenses, including your salary and your wages, so that if something does happen, you've got that, you know, money there that you can dip into. And it's all about consistency. It doesn't have to be a big amount every week. You can start with something small and then gamify it. And honestly, as you see the savings mount up, you'll be inclined to save more and more, I promise you.
It's gamified, I like that.
Yeah, totally. I do that now. I've got my 3 months, but I'm thinking, okay, what else can I sort of put in there? You know, do I want a bonus at the end of this year? Would I like to take the family on a nice holiday? So I'm continually adding to my savings just to see how much I can, you know, if I can reach the target that I want to reach each year.
I'd just like to go back to something that you said about the $42,000 tax debt.
Yes, the elephant in the room. Yes. Well, let me explain that one. So I was a girl who'd started a business and I definitely did not do numbers. It was not my thing. I was a creative business owner, don't do numbers, just want to run this little retail store and not have to worry about it. But, you know, I thought, I'm going to go to the accountant, I'm going to do the right thing and ask the accountant, what do I need to worry about in my business? And at the time they said to me, just don't spend more than you earn and make sure you're registered for the right taxes. So I did all of that and was absolutely flabbergasted to get this, you know, tax debt in an email. But it turned out the accountant had made a mistake with the way she had processed our BAS return. Now, I would have had to pay that money at some point anyway, but because of that error in processing, which I didn't find out for a year, mind you, until I got a new accountant, it meant that I needed to pay it now. And there's nothing worse than being in trouble with the tax debt. And that kind of sent me on this journey into learning everything I could possibly learn about money and about business. So, yeah.
I think it also shows to business owners they might get this terrible tax debt, but, you know, keep the communication lines open.
Totally.
Obviously, you set up a payment plan.
Yep,
that kind
that's
of
right.
thing.
Yep, set up a payment plan with the ATO. Really scary to sort of make that phone call, and my accountant sort of wanted nothing to do with it because she was still flummoxed as to why we ended up with the tax debt. That probably tells you everything you need to know about the accountant that I was using at the time. But yeah, made that payment plan. The ATO were super generous about it. I just had to make sure that I stayed right on top of, you know, my taxes and everything I was doing from that point on. So it was really important to sort of, you know, dot those I's and cross those T's and keep saving.
Yeah, and a massive lesson to learn that kind of pivoted the way you did business, and also your interest and where you are now probably wouldn't have happened.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, I mean, I wouldn't recommend what I did. I went and, you know, studied, became a registered BAS agent, did 1,000 hours of, you know, BAS prep that was supervised. Yes, it's as boring as it sounds, but for me, it was an all or nothing sort of thing. And I don't think it needs to be like that. I think people can just, learn a bit as they go. Just take that tiny bit of interest in their finances and it will make so much difference to your business.
Yeah, so going back to expenses and the unexpected expenses, managing expenses, what are some strategies as well that maybe business owners can put into place to kind of keep their costs under control? I know you and I were talking before the show about electricity and how much is just wasted on standby power as an example. What are some things that you think about, obviously not as obvious as that, but for keeping your expenses in control?
Yeah, I think it starts with understanding what it costs you to run your business. And for most small business owners in particular, they don't really know what it costs them to run their business because they might be paying some things out of their bank account, some things on a credit card, maybe they're using PayPal or, their iPhone or, smartphone to pay some of their subscriptions. So I think it's really understanding what it costs you to run your business and then going through those expenses line by line. So hopefully you've got a profit and loss statement that you can print out and have a look at, but if you don't, have a look at all those regular expenses you pay, going through them line by line, thinking, okay, what am I doubling up on? What is it that I'm using in my business? Maybe you paid for a beta subscription and you forgot to cancel it. So, are you using Monday and Asana, but you only really need to use one? So it's the double ups. What can you downgrade, especially now, to a free or cheaper version of something that you're already using? What can you get rid of altogether? And more importantly, where can you make a phone call, jump on an email, jump on a live chat and get a better deal? Because there are lots of better deals out there. People are quite keen to offer better deals rather than losing you as a customer. So I think that you'd be surprised what you can save. We were just talking about that, as you said, with the electricity and just, making that telephone call. And for a lot of people, it's the effort, to do that. But my, sort of advice is to pick one thing every week. Just make that phone call, see what you can save, particularly for bigger bills like insurances and things like that, because you will save money.
We've got a couple of questions coming through, so I might tackle them now. The first one is from Ita, and she says, is there a way to check the credentials of the accountant that you are considering using? Your story is the type of thing that keeps me up at night.
Yes, absolutely. Look, I think the Tax Practitioners Board is a great place to check whether people are registered and whether they've got any sort of, crosses against their name. But I think for me, what I've learned over the last few years is it's all about word of mouth recommendations. I think talk to people that are the small business owners' friends. See, who their accountant is. Do they like them? Is the accountant there to help or hinder? Because quite often we think that if we hire an accountant, it needs to be a bit of a dictatorship. And if our accountant says to jump, we'll say how high. But for me, it needs to be a partnership. You need to be working, in tandem with someone who gets what it is you want to achieve in business, and particularly for women who isn't, someone who isn't going to belittle you or make you feel small because you've got a small business, who understands what it is you're doing and what it is you want to achieve. And I think doing that through word of mouth is a great way. But then I always go one step further. I say, jump on the phone, have a conversation with that accountant, see how they can help you get to where you want to go. And I think you will know who you gel with and who you're not going to be afraid to call and ask a question, because for a lot of us, that becomes the impediment. We're afraid to ask the question because we think we'll look silly.
Yeah, true. But first, stop that Tax Practitioners Board.
Tax Practitioners Board, most definitely. If they're not registered on there, if they don't pop up as someone who's registered, then move on.
Yeah. Is there like a list of, bad actors?
Oh, look, I don't think it sort of necessarily has a naughty list and a good list, but you'll certainly see whether people are registered or not. And that means that they have to have all the right, affiliations and insurance and be doing the professional development. So it's a great place a great resource.
All right, Mary asks, do you have to rely on savings and the time it takes to accumulate savings? What funding or grant options have you found to be useful?
There are lots of different grant options around, and again, if you go to business.gov.au, it is such a useful tool. You can actually go to their grants page and you can fill in a number of questions about your business and what it is you're trying to achieve, and it will actually spit out a list of grants that might be applicable to your business. There are grants at every level, from your local council right up to federal level. And there are also grants through private companies, through different investors will often put together grants. So it's really important to, make sure that the grant that you're applying for is something that you're going to use in your business, but you have to read the terms and conditions. I know quite a few people who have applied for and received grants only to find that because they didn't, adhere to every single, requirement of the grant, they actually had to pay the money back. So you don't want that. So I think it's about finding that right grant, keeping your eye out. And as I said, if you register, you can get an email that will come through. There are also companies who will look for grants on your behalf and actually apply for them on your behalf, because there's probably some finesse in getting someone else to write your grant application for you.
Yeah, it's like business awards as well. It's always a good idea to get someone else to help you write your application.
Well, often they'll see something about you and your business that you won't see, or that you'll be afraid to put down on a piece of paper.
So I'd like to jump back into my questions now. So what I'm wanting to ask is about pricing, because everything's going up, but sometimes small businesses are reluctant to raise their prices because they're worried it might make them lose customers. So what's your advice? What strategy would you suggest for a business that's wanting to increase their prices?
Well, my philosophy on this is that you need to check your prices at least every 6 months, regardless of what's going on in the economy. But I think when times are tough, you probably need to check more frequently than that. I know people who haven't done a price check for 20 years in their business and wonder why they're not making any money. But I think if you do the numbers, you come up with a price that covers the cost of doing business, your wages, your super, your taxes, and gives you that profit. I think what you need to do then is be transparent with your customers. You don't need to over-explain, you don't need to apologise for increasing your prices, but you need to be transparent about what's going on and provide that little bit of a lead time. The other thing I think is, it's your business, so it's your choice. You don't need to increase prices across the board. You might pick 1 or 2 products where the prices need to go up. You also don't need to increase prices for your existing customers if you don't want to, or for that, tiny pool of loyal customers that you have. Prices go up for new people, but grandfathered for the people who are currently in your business. But I think it's about having the conversation. And as I said, super important. Don't over-explain and don't apologise, because your ideal customers will find you regardless of what your price is, as long as you can share the value that you're going to provide with them.
And so obviously your ideal customers are also the ones that are paying you on time. So
true, absolutely true.
What do we do about those late payers? Because that's a real issue for so many business owners. How can you manage that?
Yeah, sure is. And so many people become quite nervous about chasing money that they're owed. And it makes a lot of sense. Money conversations aren't nice conversations to have. So I always say, shorten your payment terms, 7-day payment terms, if you can possibly manage that. And then once we get to day 8 and somebody hasn't paid you, I think an email needs to go out immediately, just a gentle reminder to let people know. And then if people still haven't paid you, I think it's about jumping on the phone and having a conversation. I was discussing this with some bookkeepers the other day, and we were talking about the difference that in-person phone call can make versus the 3 or 4 or 5 different emails or text messages to people, because often there's an issue. People feel embarrassed. They can't afford to pay the full amount, so they do nothing at all. They put their head in the sand. And what that phone call might do is enable you to come up with a payment plan or a way to kind of move forward to get the payment, the overpayment resolved, or sorry, the non-payment resolved. I think the other thing, and this is what I see quite often with service providers who are doing big jobs, is that they're not asking for deposits up front because they're concerned that maybe their client can't afford it. And even if they do ask for a deposit up front, they're not asking for progress payments as the project goes on. And so what they're doing is they're waiting this big long period of time until they send that final invoice. And when they send that final invoice, there's often some reluctance to actually push send on it. And you know, people can't afford to pay that massive invoice at the end. So progress payments are great. Also helps with your cash flow.
And oftentimes it's also the big end of town that's holding up the payments. They're letting the little guys foot the bill for everything along the way, and then they hit them with 60-day payment terms.
Exactly, yeah.
Because some of them might have, offshore owners, and that's the way the terms of conditions of service are. Like, what can you do about that? Because, the Ombudsman has been really pushing for businesses to be paid in 30 days or less, 14 days or less would be ideal. What if you're working with a big corporate and they're not paying you? What can you do?
I think you have to factor that in. I think the reality is that some of the bigger corporates, where you're going to make no doubt more money by working with them, you have to understand what their terms and conditions are at the beginning. And if they're telling you it's a 60-day, payment term, then you have to factor that into your cash flow. So it might be finding a few little jobs that can fit in and manage your cash flow that way. I think if they're still not paying you after that period, again, it's that conversation, before you take legal action.
Or name and shame them on the late payment register.
True, what a good idea.
So what about your cash flows down to a trickle? So you're thinking, I might need some finance to kind of tide me over. What would you suggest business owners be looking at? Like invoice finance, an actual loan? What is it really dependent on their circumstances?
Yeah, look, I think it depends. I think it depends on, how much money you want, the timing, when do you need the money by, and what do you need it for? It could be as simple as going to the bank and getting an overdraft on your account. It could be taking out a loan. Maybe it's pursuing crowdfunding or applying for a grant. Of course, those things are going to take time. I think it comes down to, what's the risk and what's the reward, and really understanding the pros and the cons of all the different options that you have, because there are angel investors, there's peer-to-peer lending, there's so many different things. And just understanding what is going to work best for your business and what's going to help your business right now. And once you make that decision, if you're unsure about that decision, talk to your accountant. But I think once you make that decision, then just make sure you can afford to repay that finance. It's really important.
So if I was looking at a more traditional finance, like getting a bank loan or whatever, are there things I should be aware of?
Look, I think it's always difficult for small businesses to get bank loans. So my advice would be to go through a broker who specialises in business finance. It's not going to cost you anything, but it's going to give you all the options, and you're getting an expert essentially to find a loan that will work for your business based on your time frame, how much money you want, and what you're going to do with those funds. So I think that's really important. They can also speed the process up, which might help fit in with your timeline. But I think you have to be really conscious about things like interest rates. So we've all seen interest rates go up dramatically over the last 12 months. If we only had a reliable crystal ball to see what's going to happen next, we'd be able to answer this question easily, but we don't. So if the interest rate goes up another %, can you afford to make those repayments? Do you have that buffer that will allow you to kind of fund your finance and still carry on doing business? And I think, the other thing is, if you've already got a loan with a bank, or you're thinking of taking one out and something happens, there's a hardship there, again, it comes down to communication and, asking for that better deal, because banks are more inclined now to say yes. They're not tone deaf as much as we think they are. They will come to the party if they possibly can, even if it's a repayment freeze for a couple of months. I think they're more helpful than you think.
So you mentioned alternate avenues for finance, things like angel investors. So Lorraine has just asked, where can you find angel investors?
I think it's a matter of Googling. I think there are some businesses who like Tech Ready Women who have crowdfunding, like pitch days, where you can go along and you can actually pitch to a group of people who are literally there to give money away to business. But otherwise, I think it's looking around, Googling, just seeing what's out there, looking at the grant finders, going to some of the people who specialise in the grants, because they're going to have their finger on the pulse. And also, there are so many great business groups on Facebook where you can actually ask the question. Xero, for example, at the moment has, is literally giving money away to small business. So jump on into that, and it's no repayment there. So
so Xero.
Yeah, totally. Not an ad for Xero, but.
So when we're talking about harking back to the forecasting you were talking about earlier, and the templates and things that you can get from the Business Gov site, in terms of the metrics, once we've done our forecasting on the day-to-day though, what are the kind of metrics that business owners should be looking at to make sure that their business is on track to hit that forecast?
Sure. I think, it's a great question, because it's going to really depend on your business, what phase of business you're at. So are you startup, are you scaling? But also the season of business for you. So what is the financial goal that you're trying to achieve? I think so many of us go to days or go to events where we can sit down and we can write out our goals for the next quarter or the next year, but very few of us sit down and set financial goals, and I love a good financial goal. And so I think, what are the financial goals in your business is, looking at your cash flow, do you need to get a bit of a cash injection? So if that's the case, is it, what the conversions, is it being, talking to more customers, and how many of those people can I convert to paying customers? If you need to advertise, what's the return on investment for your advertising dollar? It could be, that you want to reduce your expenses by 5%, and you want to do that over the next 3 months. So I think the metrics that you're going to focus on are going to be different depending on the different seasons and those financial goals that you've set for yourself. But one thing I always say to people is look at the net profit, because I want everybody to make a profit, a net profit. So that is what's left, that unencumbered money after everything else is paid for, wages, super, all that sort of stuff. So have a look at that and try and be increasing that net profit, because that's a good marker of how your business is going, and one that everybody should be looking at, regardless of what other things might be on the top of their priority list.
Yeah, because you might go, oh, my business made $1 million. Yes, but what was the actual profit?
Right. And I know a few businesses who have made multiple millions of dollars and have no profit. Yeah. So don't believe all the things you see on social media.
We've got a few more questions coming through. Anna is asking, are there general rules of thumb for how much to set aside for tax, super and contingencies?
So for tax and super, it's about 25 to 30%. I think, if you follow the profit first model, which I know a number of small businesses do, it's around that mark, 25 to 30%. I think if you push that across, you'll be fine. I think for savings, it's generally what you can afford, even if it's a couple of percent. It's just about consistency. But I think, if you can set aside 25 to 30% for your tax, then you should be doing okay. And put it into a separate account. Have a tax savings account. Yeah. So 3 accounts: business account, tax savings account, rainy day account.
Yeah, and the rainy day one, you shouldn't be able to get into that easily.
Totally. I think that the thing that I sort of applied to my own business is when the money's gone from my main business account, it's not my money anymore. And I think the other thing is, particularly when it comes to taxes, if you're registered for GST or you're paying staff, I think it's about understanding that that money doesn't belong to you. You're just a tax collector for the government, which is a shame because it's an extra
you
thing.
don't get paid for it.
That you have to do, and you don't get paid for it, but you need to kind of put that money aside so that you don't get into trouble with the tax department.
Yeah. Another question, this one is from Larissa. She's asking, as a small business, would you recommend an overdraft and how much should it be? I.e., what % based on your turnover?
I think, again, the overdraft needs to be something that is manageable for your business. I think that's the key. I don't necessarily think it needs to be a percentage of turnover because, as you said before, you could be earning $1 million but have absolutely zero profit in your business. It needs to be something that you can manage. So if push comes to shove, you can pay that off because the interest on an overdraft is quite expensive. So, and you don't want to consistently be in overdraft. You want to sort of only dip into that overdraft when you have a big bill that you have to pay, and for some reason something's gone wrong, you don't have the funds to pay it. So I think that's really key. So I wouldn't be focused on necessarily a percentage of turnover. I'd be focused on what can I repay, what can I manage if it all hits the fan.
Mary's asking, can you recommend a good grant writer service / business or the best place to search for them?
Oh gosh, I think if you go to Kate Toon, actually, I think you might know Kate. Kate has a site called Digital MasterChef. If you go to Kate's site, she has a job board, so you can literally put in a job there where you can ask for grant writers. And within Kate's group, Digital Marketing Collective, there are loads of grant writers. So head on over there.
Nice plug for Kate too.
Nice plug for Kate. Yeah, she'll pay me later.
I don't know that she needs to be paid at the moment. That new book of hers is going gangbusters.
Sure is.
6 figures while you sleep.
Yep.
Passive income, something we all need to get into, I think.
Totally.
So there's another tax question I have. Since you're saying we're basically collecting, we're the collectors for the government. Make sure you don't spend that. That's one obvious mistake. Do not spend the money that you've collected for GST or put aside for your tax. What are some other mistakes you see business owners making? Well,
Australian small business owes $24 billion in tax to the ATO right now. So that's a mixture of GST and PAYG. So that's a lot of money. So I think that largely comes from people who are collecting and then spending that money, not, putting it aside and being able to pay it off. But I think a large problem with our system is that it's a complicated system. And I think it's really difficult as a small business owner, particularly if finance isn't your thing, to understand what it is, the rules and regulations that you need to be complying to in your business. So I think one of the biggest things I see is, people who need to register for GST, but they don't understand when they need to register. It's, when your turnover reaches 75K, and you've got 21 days to register. So it's really not understanding what they have to adhere to is a massive problem. And I think, it's then a lack of record keeping. So not using a cloud accounting system, which makes it so easy to do business because you think you can't afford it or you think it's a waste of money. And so not having that record keeping, not having that visibility on the money, and then not really understanding what you need to be, applying to your business and not saving for the tax, not putting the money aside. So there's quite a few issues when it comes to tax, which is why we've got this massive tax debt problem in this country.
So say you don't have that visibility, so you're not aware that you're hitting that threshold. Is the ATO reasonably forgiving if it's an honest mistake?
I think so. I think, again, I'd always recommend going through an accountant because at the end of a financial year, so it's within a financial year, it's 75K within a financial year, and then you have to jump in and become registered. So I think if you realise that you've made that error at some point through the year, I would actually engage the services of a professional and get your accountant to do that work for you because they know how to speak to the ATO, and they're more inclined to be able to work something out for you in terms of, moving forward. They're quite forgiving when it comes to that,
because it's not like you've been pocketing the GST.
Exactly.
You actually haven't charged anyone the GST.
It, and you're not claiming it either. Yeah. You're not claiming the credit. So it sort of has worked both ways.
Yeah. What about starting out? That can be an incredibly expensive time for a business. What are some ways to kind of manage those costs?
Can. And of course, it depends on the business you're starting. I think if you're starting a retail venture, it's way more expensive than if you're just starting a service business from home. So I think for so many small business owners, we get really distracted by all the bright, shiny objects. So all of those things, we think, oh, maybe I need to buy into that, or maybe I need to do this. So I think it's about, really understanding by, making a list if that's your thing, but getting really clear on what you actually need to run your business. Not all the nice to do stuff, but, all the stuff that's going to help with the day to day. And then shopping around to see where you can get the best deals or what system is going to work best for your business. So I think that's the beginning. And then I think as your business grows, you can start to add the different elements that are just going to make things work better for your business. So I think there's that. I think the thing that I found when I was starting in business is when you look around at who you know, there's lots of like-minded business owners who probably provide a service that you could do within your business. So I did a lot of contra with other businesses, offered my services in exchange for things that I needed, like a website built or a graphic designer. So, there's definitely that. But I think, with startup, if you can be as lean as you can, think about bootstrapping. So essentially only spending the money when you have it. It's going to set you up really well as you go forward in your business, because you can really come unstuck in the first few months if you go and spend a lot of money and then think, okay, now I've got no cash flow, I can't keep going in this business, and I'm just not getting the clients that I expected through the door.
So a lot of our people probably tuning in are professional services. They might have started their business from home. They may not have set up a business account, so their personal finance and their business finance are very entangled. What's your advice there?
Get them detangled as fast as you can. Just purely, I had a bookkeeping and compliance business which I sold last year, and just being at the coalface and seeing the people who mix all of those things up, you waste a lot of time, energy and money in untangling those to make sure that your business expenses aren't wrapped up in the record keeping. So from a purely admin point of view, I would get them detangled for that reason. But I think, for me, one of the biggest reasons to keep them separate and to just have that business bank account where only, business expenses are being paid out of, all the money you earn is coming in, is because it's going to encourage you to pay yourself a wage, hopefully. I'm all for small business owners, no matter how small the business, paying themselves a wage, even if they start out really small and it's not the same wage they were earning in corporate, but just transferring that money out of that account every month, every week or fortnight or month, whatever you want to do. I mean, first of all, it keeps you a bit accountable. Secondly, it sends this great message that your services are worth it, this business is worth it, and you're paying yourself. But it might mean that you're not dipping into that account when you go down to, grab the groceries or get some petrol in the car. So I think it's really important to do that. And I think the other thing with that is to, if you find yourself going out and accidentally spending on your business account, grab the, debit card and put a spot of nail polish on it or a sticker so that when you pull it out to pay, you go, oh, no, that's the business account card, put it back in my purse.
Yeah, that's a good tip. So we've got another question that has come through. It's from Anna. She's asking, can you please talk about registering for GST? I know we have to register when business income hits 75k a year, but what happens then? Can we do it ourselves? Does it have to be done by a tax accountant? What's involved in completing a BAS?
What a question.
Yes. Are there common mistakes that people make when registering for GST or afterwards in relation to GST?
Sure. Okay, so first of all, you can do it yourself. You can absolutely go on and register yourself. And so again, great starting point, business.gov.au. I keep talking about that, but it really is a great tool, and that will actually take you step by step through your registration. So once you are registered for GST, then you must add GST to every invoice you send out. It can either be on top of what you're charging already, and I would absolutely encourage you to do that, or you can wrap it up in what you're already charging. But why would you do that? Because you're losing 10%. In addition to that, any expense that you have in your business that has GST on it, you can add, it's now a credit for your business. So when it comes to doing your BAS, and again, there are choices here. You can opt into doing a monthly BAS or a quarterly BAS. That's a business activity statement for anyone who isn't sure. You will basically be declaring what you've earned, how much GST you've collected on that money, and then what you've spent in your business and what your GST credits are. And so, what you have collected less what you have spent, or what your GST credits, that's essentially what you owe to the ATO, and you need to pay that within usually a couple of weeks of a period, a quarter ending. So the ATO gives you 28 days at the end of the quarter, except for the December quarter where you get an extra month. Now, if you use a BAS agent or an accountant to process those business activity statements, there's actually an additional period of time on top of that to lodge and pay. But I think the thing is, even if you choose to outsource that work, just be really conscious as the business owner that, first of all, you need to collect the money and put it aside. But secondly, you need to make a note in your calendar for when things are due, and get a rough guide of how much you're going to be liable for. So it can go in on time, because the buck will stop with you. If your bookkeeper forgets to put the BAS return in or something goes wrong, the ATO is not fining your bookkeeper, they're going to fine you.
Yeah.
So be super conscious about that. And I think, a lot of people get confused about goods and services tax. So my advice would definitely be, if you're now GST registered, dive into cloud accounting. Pay that money every month, because it is going to save you so much time and so much money in the long run, and it's a tax deduction.
Yeah, and cloud accounting will let you have that visibility.
Exactly, because essentially what you're doing is, every single bank line that is coming through in your business bank account feeds into that cloud accounting, and then either yourself or your bookkeeper or BAS agent is going to be, just attributing the income and the expenses to the different buckets that sit in behind, I call it the engine room of your business. So, you'll be attributing that, but more importantly, you're going to be looking at each one saying, okay, where is GST applicable here? And quite often that's a mistake that people make. They sort of think everything has GST in it, but not everything does. So you have to be really conscious of that. A lot of overseas subscriptions don't have it. You can tick boxes for things like Facebook and crazy domains where you don't have to pay the GST even if you are registered. Things like water, for example, food, no GST on those. So it's about really being conscious.
Yeah.
Call in an expert, that's my advice. Get them to do the BAS return for you.
Sure. We've talked about being in business, starting a business. What about scaling a business? When do you know it's time to make the leap to grow bigger? What should the figures be looking like?
Yeah, I think, again, it's not necessarily about, the numbers. I think, that can be a good guide, but I think it just comes down to how popular your services are. Is there the demand there? And if you're going to scale and take on additional staff and offer more services, can your business sustain that? And honestly, there are 3 things you need in place to be able to do that. The first one is to have fantastic systems and processes in place. So every time you do something that's a day-to-day or a mundane task, write it down. Film yourself doing it, because that is going to help you fundamentally save time, money, resources when new people come into your business. Get the finance basics right, really important, because you've got to know how much cash flow you've got and all those sorts of things so you can move forward. And then the next one is to hire the right people. so many of us will hire, our first hire might be a part-time VA. And then as we begin to scale and grow, we expect our VA to be able to do our social media, write our newsletters, market our business. And they may or may not have that skill set. So make sure you're hiring the right people. And I think if you do those three things, then you can move forward confidently. But again, it comes down to the demand. What's the demand for your services, and is there that ability to sell more if you add more people to your business?
I actually can't believe it, but we've run out of time.
Golly.
That was so quick. So that's all we've got time for today. But if you'd like to find out more about Justine and her services, head to justinemclean.com.au. Justine, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I'm sure our audience has learned some valuable tips to help them manage their business finances better. And if you're looking for more small business advice, check out our website at kochiesbusinessbuilders.com.au for more resources, tips, and small business success stories. I might just give Justine a plug for her book though before we go. Hold it up, my lady. I'll hold it up for you. This is Justine's awesome new book, Become a Business Money Magnet. So I'm sure you can get it at bookshops everywhere. I forgot to give her a plug earlier, so I'm doing it now.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Justine, and thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you next time when we'll be diving into all things sales season. So you can find out how to make the most of Click Frenzy, Black Friday sales, holiday sales, and more. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye for now.